Welcome back to the Occult Rejects. Tonight we got a packed house here, and we got a returning guest, Richard Ruach, fan favorite, and we all love him on the Occult Rejects, which is why a whole bunch of us are here. But before we introduce Dick, we will get to that's another name for Richard, isn't it? We will get to the loon.
You just found out the key.
Yeah. Now I just need the lock to put it in. The loon, please. Let everybody know what is up with you and where we can find all your amazing stuff.
I'm glad to be back here, and you can find me on YouTube, X, and on Spreaker as The Loon. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you joining us. And Jin the Ninja, what is going on, man? Thank you very much for making it tonight. I'm surprised. I didn't think you could.
I didn't think I could either, but thank you so much for inviting me, boss. Appreciate it. Cardinal Electric Head. Okay, Mr. 93. So you can follow me at thresholdsaints.substack.com or on my X Twitter at Wukong Reborn, WUKONG Reborn, or at Threshold Saints on both IG and Twitter. Yeah, just check that out. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. Excited to be here.
Well, you got to plug the Grey Lodge, too. That's a separate whole show, too.
Oh, yeah, of course. That's Grey Lodge is our bi-monthly show. Sorry about that. You can follow us on YouTube.
Is it bi-weekly or bi-monthly?
Bi-monthly. Twice every other Friday night. So
that's bi-weekly.
Bi-monthly.
Bi-monthly.
Two Fridays a month.
All right, you're screwing it up, but it's okay.
Oh, maybe I am. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, regardless of my screw up,
the intro anyway, so I'll drag that out.
Well, at True Grey Lodge, at youtube.com/@the-true-grey-lodge, TRVE Grey Lodge. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. And all my Threshold Saints will be on there too. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I actually got to get your schedule down so I can have good guests on the weeks that you're not doing it, so I can make sure you're here. I was realizing that. I was like, fuck, man. I was like, this Grey Lodge shit fucks me up from getting Jen on here. I was like, but then when you cut it down, I was like, ooh, I got a chance. So it works out for me. Thank you. Nice. Kaiba, what is going on, Kaiba? Thank you so much for making it. I know Brandon couldn't, but that doesn't mean you can't hang out. So thank you for coming.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be back. It's been a while. Everybody can find me on Instagram and YouTube as well as Facebook. I do daily and weekly astrology videos. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. And we got to get you back on again to kind of show off your expertise. So we'll make that happen very soon. Yes, yes.
Thank you.
And we got the man himself, Robbie Marks. What is going on, sir? He's back. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I just got back into town and I saw this was going on and I was happy to jump on. And it's good to see everybody, old faces and new. If you don't know who I am, I'm R. Marks or Robbie Marks, artist, illustrator. And if you want to check out my various artworks, my social media, and then I also have the MetaMindcast podcast, which is going on 2 years running now. You can go to my Linktree, which is Linktr.ee RMARX, and that will pull up the whole plethora of everything. And yeah, thanks for having me on, Nick.
Oh, of course. Thank you very much, man. I appreciate you making it. And Ethan Indigo, what is going on, sir? How are you?
My bust. Great to be here. I'm excited for this. Great to see everybody. Ethan Indigo Smith on all the social media. Recent article on occultresearchinstitute.org. Hope that I got that right if I flubbed that. And yeah, appreciate everyone being here and easy to find. And please feel free to reach out.
Hell yeah. Thank you very much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. And he's got a ton of books to go check out. So if you're interested, go look up Ethan Indigo on Amazon. You'll see a whole bunch of books. I know he doesn't like to promote himself, but I think he should. So I did it for him. And we got Jules, my man Jules. What is going on, sir? He's got the Occult Reject shirt on, too. He's fucking representing. Look at that shit. Holla.
Man, always. What's going on, guys? Making sure my audio is good. What's going on? I'm Jules, host of the Grey Pill Podcast. Haven't been on the Occult Rejects in about, I think, a little over a month now. So it's good to be back, guys. It's good to see everybody. Nick, thank you for inviting me. And Richard, it's good to see you again, sir. Can't wait to learn from you like I did last time. Yeah, if y'all want to find me, you can go over to patreon.com/greypilledpodcast. Gods of the Morning Wood tomorrow morning, Prose Edda, and something else, some other treatise, and Occult Cinema. Yeah, Grey Pill Pod on Twitter. But yeah, happy Frigs Day. Let's go.
All right. Awesome. Thank you very much, Jules. Definitely go check out his Occult Cinema. It's banging. I was on it, so you know it was good.
3 episodes in, all heaters. Like,
yeah, he's got really good movies that I know he's going to be using, so definitely check it out.
Patreon.
And finally, the man himself, Richard Ruach. Please let everybody know what is your deal and where they can find all your amazing work, sir.
Hello, gentlemen, ladies. It is I, Dick Ruach, otherwise known as Richard Breath. You can find me on YouTube. I stream every Sunday or Saturday if you're EST. So tomorrow I stream. I'm currently with my little esoteric book club going through Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall rather slowly because I give commentary and my chat derails me consistently. But I mean, you know, the derailing is part of the fun. So you can find me there. You can find me on Substack. You can find me on Twitter or X, as it has been redubbed. And I'm here today to talk about one of my favorite guys, Gurdjieff.
So what is it about this man that catches your attention?
He's... Sorry, I squealed there for a second.
Yeah, a little excited like a schoolgirl.
Yeah. Oh, my God. So, guys, he's this guy. He's Gurdjieff. Oh, my God. He's a 10. So why he's interesting is he kind of ticks a lot of boxes that you would think of when you think of like a kind of like the archetypal mystery man almost. Like, you know, he has that esoteric quality to him. He has obscure origins. Like no one's quite sure when his birthday is. No one's quite, and he's got like mysterious, I don't know, racial epithets, like he's Greek Armenian, but he was born in Russia, but where he's born is nowadays modern Turkey. It's like that part of land switched hands, and it's this overlaying of multiple different things. When you hear him, he knew multiple different languages, and he wasn't a trust fund baby as well. He worked. He knew how to make cash, which is also something that's rare. You know, usually when you think of the spiritual guru, you think of the guy who's poor under a tree, or like, I don't know, someone like Crowley who's chronically broke. And so with Gurdjieff, he knew about cash. He knew how to flip a business, start a carpet business, flip it, do this, do that. He was an interesting guy.
You know what's interesting though? If you go back to the Renaissance, I wouldn't say like they were rolling around in the dough, but they knew people to become patrons. So I mean, you know.
Yeah,
they were still using somebody for money, so that is kind of interesting when you look at it.
Yeah, he had connections. He had some weird connections as well. And it's hard because he's so obscure. A lot of people, what's the term? Hagiography. They add to his myth by being like, I saw him in Tibet. Trust me, source. Trust me. And like, I want to believe, but you know, the Gurdjieff in Tibet theory is a bit weird. And there's some where it's like, he knew him and Stalin went to the same school because they were in Georgia at the same time or something. Like, okay. You hear all sorts of things, but the guy knew his stuff, and the guy could talk. And to give like a funny like tidbit, like there's one thing I knew about. We know a lot about his students: Ouspensky, Maurice Nicole, J.G. Bennett, or Raj. What I didn't know until recently was J.G. Bennett, one of his students, was actually a British Fed. He was literally a spy for the Brits. And one of the things that happened is, you know, this Gurdjieff guy appeared, and he was told by his like officers, like, hey, check this guy out, you know, see what's his deal. And he got so entranced with Gurdjieff and ensconced and like enmeshed in the work that he just kind of left the feds and became a full-time practitioner of the work, and basically became one of the work lineages as the J.G. Bennett lineage. And I just think like that is almost a testament to the man, that he had such a profound mysticism that he could convert the feds. That's how crazy it was. That's how crazy potent it was.
That's awesome.
It's like usually the feds come in, they subvert, but it's like the poison comes in and he transmutes it into being his real student and becomes a teacher. That's a testament.
So I know with him, his stuff is considered what, the fourth way,
Yeah. So he never. Well,
or
He
people
called
are calling it that.
he called it the work, but it's basically called the fourth way now. He used the fourth way as a concept to talk about different schools. Because maybe we can talk about this, like, what is the fourth way? Because you hear the word fourth way. You hear the word fourth way, and you're like, I don't even know the first three ways, man. And it's like, okay. So he has this concept, and he uses terms which are a little outdated now. But if you just try and get in the head of someone in, like, the early 1900s, you can kind of see where he's coming from. So just to give them the names, he gives the first way, the way of, he calls the first way the way of the fakir, the second way the way of the monk, and the third way the way of the yogi. But then he defines them. So the fakir is a weird word. Like, we don't really use it nowadays. But what a fakir is if you think of, it's a bit outdated, but if you think of, the archetypal Indian kind of street magician who has a turban and lays on a bed of nails, that is a sort of an understanding of a fakir. But what the fakirism that he meant to kind of talk about was someone who's able to use their body in a particular way, or uses the path of the body. It's a path, and it's a spiritual path that does have certain actualizations, but it uses the body. Not necessarily like, a guy who goes to the gym uses the body. Yeah, but he uses the body for the sake of the body. Whereas a fakir would use the body to train something else, train something higher. So think of, you can go to the gym and you're like, it takes a lot of willpower to lift some weights. But what if I told you to hold your hand out, like, up above your head? How long could you do that for? How would you be sweating? After 5 minutes, you'd be sweating. After 10 minutes, like. And there's people who do, like, who are able to hold their fakirs who hold their hand up for like years and years and years. Some of them, their arm atrophies in that position. Like, think of the pain, think of the willpower, think of the overcoming that would take. And you hear, stories of fakirs, sitting on top of anthills or doing things like that. But it's, the concept is they're engaging their body in a way to really work something higher, so that higher thing is trained. And then that higher thing is developed, the consciousness is developed, and then the consciousness can interact with the body in a more profound way. So they have more control over their body than a normal person. Like, they can control their blood pressure or their body heating. Or there's some extreme stories of, like, a fakir who got his students to bury him alive, and they stuck a reed in his mouth, and so he was buried alive, and the reed was sticking out so he could still breathe. But he was able to control his body in such a way that he could consciously shut everything down and go into basically a hibernated state. And they just, like, left him there for, like, several weeks. There's a bunch of different stories, like several weeks, a month.
You know what they would do to you mentally, though?
And then they pull him out of the ground after allotment time and slap it, resuscitate him and start some processes up again. And he comes back to life. It's like, that is the way of the fakir. And you can think, oh, dominion of body, but you're working with the body to train something high, to train the will, to train the consciousness. That's the thing that you're trying to train. You're trying to train that thing in these ways. So the way of the fakir is the way of the body. The way of the monk, the second way, is the way of emotion. And the best way, I think, to describe the monk, the celibate monk, is, there's a book which I can plug called The Cloud of Unknowing. And it's a very famous book in the Western mystical Christian tradition. And that book, just to go through that book, if anyone's heard of it, just for those who haven't heard of it, that book is 1,000 years old now, by the way. It was written anonymously by a monk to another monk. And it was never meant to be published for the filthy, unwashed masses. But nonetheless, we have it, and it's a good thing as well. So one monk who had attained something was basically talking to another monk who started contemplative exercises and was getting some sort of effects. And it's basically what that book is a bunch of letters from one monk to another. And it's fun. You open the book and it starts off with, like, don't give these teachings to anyone else. And it's like, oh, damn, someone messed up. We don't know the true origin or author of the book. But in that book, he basically gives the way of the monk, the way of kind of prayer. The Cloud of Unknowing is the book's title. And to give a very brief outline, the whole concept is you stand on the cloud of forgetting, and you forget the world, and then you look up. And when you look up to God, you don't see God. You see there's another cloud blocking you, and this is the cloud of unknowing. Your mind cannot penetrate this cloud. It is the cloud of unknowing, and the only thing that can pierce it. And so in the book, he says, you must pierce it with thrusts of love, which is very interesting. It's very interesting, the terminology he uses. He doesn't say, projects love, compassion, loving kindness. He says thrusts of love, like a spear, like it's very physicality for something. But the love, the emotion, is the thing that bridges, that is able to, not the mind can't pierce the cloud of unknowing, but the thrusts of love can pierce it to a point, and then God reaches down on the other side and you're able to connect. And the emotion is the bridge. The emotion is the thing that's trained, that then connects to the divine. Think of like the Michelangelo, the Sistine Chapel, and there's the God reaching down to Adam. God is reaching down to us, but Adam sitting there isn't just being like a sissy boy, like, oh, and not doing anything. He's reaching up as well. So we need to reach up. That's the way of the monk, using the thrusts of love, using the emotion, the emotional center, as Gurdjieff would say. And so they primarily use the emotion, but it's hard because like emotions are fickle. So, if you're in life and you're like, I'm going to do some thrusts of love, I'm going to pray, I'm going to do this. And then it's like, I wonder the boys' season finale is coming up. You're going to get distracted. So one of the things that Gurdjieff says about the way of the monk is you can't really do it in life. Hence, you have to kind of go away. And the same with the fakir. To really, have that focus, you kind of need to go away. And so this is the way 1, 2, and 3. There's this separation from physical life in them. And then the third way is the way of the yogi, which is the way of the mind. But once again, just like in the way of the fakir, you can use your body in a type of activity, but really via restriction, and non-activity is where you get this real training from. Same with the mind. The way of the mind, it doesn't mean like, you calculate math good and your mind goes super fast and you're super rational. The path of the yogi is actually restricting of the mind onto a point. And you restrict the mind, you restrict the energies to a point. And this allows certain connections to higher things, yada, yada, yada. So you have these three ways, and it's the terms for them are a little bit outdated because, yogi, when you hear his definition of it, it's like, the way I see it is, clearly he's had some connection with Vedantic, maybe Advaita Vedanta schools that are very philosophic. And so that's his concept. But nowadays, when you think of kind of yoga, there's Hatha yoga, there's Bhakti. Bhakti yoga is basically the second way, the way of the heart. And then there's Raja yoga, and more Jnana yoga is kind of what he's talking about, this mental kind of way. And so you could say, so the fourth way is, of course, then the synthesis. The concept is, instead of striking man on one side and developing him in one way, you strike man on all sides at the same time. And this way is, in a way, it's slower and it has less dramatic effects. If you go on one of these other ways, you can get really dramatic, kind of powers in a sense. Like, the fakir guy who can go into hibernation, that's very dramatic. But nonetheless, the stuff that you do on the fourth way is, to Gurdjieff, permanent. His concept of the fourth way is it's hard, it's slow, and there's little rewards. You don't get as much on the fourth way, but the results you get are permanent changes to your being. So, because sometimes you hear like a monk stays a monk and then he comes back into society and they just eventually they're able to keep a level, but eventually they lose themselves and they just become an old person in society or something.
Yeah. It's like
they go back into life.
You can't go back.
Yeah. So the fourth way is real transformation, and real transformation is hard. And so that is, So the fourth way is this way of
hypnosis.
What's that?
Do you consider that maybe like equating hypnosis?
Hypnosis. I mean, that would be an aim. Hypnosis would be an aim.
I guess, yeah.
But
Well, wouldn't the life-changing experience be the aim that you're going for too?
Yeah, he would say something like, you want to change being. And here's the thing about like experiences. It's like the experiences are the experience, but they usually arise because of changes. And so the experience is good, but it's like you want the change fundamentally, whether it comes with a visual experience or an astral experience or not. And so he has these kind of, in Gurdjieff's system, he has different levels of man. So there's man 1, 2, and 3, which aren't really above each other. They're all kind of simps. And then there's the fourth man, who is the balanced man. And the fourth man has certain qualities to him. But then after that is the fifth man, and then the sixth man, and the seventh man. And it's quite interesting. We can kind of go into them. But the fourth man is quite interesting to talk about, because how do you know when someone's a fourth man or not? So how do you know when someone's balanced? Because when you look at the man 1, 2, and 3, and you think like, what am I? One way you can easily nut that out is how do you solve your problems? Because man number 1 will always try to solve his problems physically. And that's great. You know, if you need to make a vegetable garden out back, you just go out and start digging. Whereas like an intellectual man will probably be like researching online, like what goes with what and what plants work here and what's the best soil acidity to have. And then like a month later, he still hasn't done anything. Whereas the man number 1 kind of gets stuff done with his physical body. But if he needs to do taxes, it's a little bit difficult for man number 1. He can't do that, you know, with his body. If he has relationship problems with a friend, he can talk it out, but maybe he needs to use his fists, you know, that kind of thing. Whereas man number 2 is, well, I'm not going to say is good with relationships, but they try to solve their problems with their emotions. They try to solve relationship problems with them. You know, with the taxes, they'll probably like cry and emotionally manipulate someone into doing the taxes for them. You know, that kind of thing. That's a man number 2. Man number 3, the intellectual, will try to solve their problems with pure intellection, which will work if you have a math problem. But in a relationship, when you say, honey, those are just the facts, you're going to get slapped. And it doesn't work out. So this is just it. It's, if you see how your tendency, a person's tendency on how they solve their problems, that shows their leaning on like what center they lean on. If it's there, this is another concept Gurdjieff uses. He talks about the centers of man, the motor center, the emotional center, and the intellectual center. And which center you have your center of gravity in is fundamentally what man you are. So there's how you solve your problems, and then there's your likes. Someone who's a man number 1, a physical man, you'll probably like certain, not just to move your body, but you'll also like to watch people move their body. So it could be, man number 1 could be the guy at the gym who's buff, but it could also be the guy with like a huge beer belly, you know, sitting in front of the TV watching the Olympics and just kind of, you know, watching a figure skater fall and being like, oh, what an idiot. Like that guy's technically a man number 1. He loves watching the motion of bodies. He likes watching, you know, animals move, horse races. He likes watching, you know, the footy, guys moving. It's that kind of thing. You're entertained by the movement of bodies, boxing and things like watching boxing, things like that. Man number 2 is entertained by sentimental stimulus. So you could think of, I don't know, women who are addicted to romance novels. They're man number 2. That's that kind of thing. That's their likes. Guys and gals who are addicted to gossip. You know what they say? It's like there are people who talk about people, events, and ideas. It's like people who just talk about other people and like, what's the drama? What's the tea? Like that. Yeah, that's classic. That's classic emotional centered person.
I like
someone
that.
Who's centered in the emotional cylinder. And then, of course, the third type of person is the intellectual person likes it when ideas connect. So also someone who solves a lot of Sudoku puzzles, like the sensation of solving puzzles is fun, but also the person who always comes in with like, have you heard the latest scientific discovery? Like it's a new idea, like, oh, like that's the almost the Redditor, the intellectual Redditor is man number 3. They're like, have you heard the source? Like, that's man number 3. That's man number 3. And all of these people are cool people, but they're imbalanced. They just live through one center. They're man number 3. And it's not like man number 3 should, do the yogi path. They can, and they may get stuff out of it. But the fourth way is about balancing these things. And a lot of people in life who I would say have not good education, but they're raised properly and have a somewhat good education will usually have a sort of a balance in maybe 2 centers. Like there'll be the footy guy who also reads philosophy, or the art chick who also is good at math, or does fencing or something on the side. There's something like that. It's like good people who you see in life who have things more together. You'll notice that they're more balanced in 2 of their cylinders than just one. People who are usually lopsided really kind of struggle because it's due with those problems. So a fourth man is someone who's perfectly balanced in a sense. I should say they're psychically balanced as well, because when your centers are imbalanced, they don't communicate, because the centers aren't just where your personality is. It's literally your motor cylinder. If you're not connected to your motor cylinder, you ever do that thing? Oh, it doesn't happen anymore. Remember in the 90s? Remember in the 90s where you had keys for your car and you'd have to put the key in and unlock instead of just beep? And you do that thing where you leave your keys in the ignition and you get out and you closing the door, but your motor cylinder is just going automatic, but your intellectual cylinder is like, oh my God, I'm locking my keys in my car. And you just do it and you're like, oh, I'm an idiot. Remember when that doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't happen anymore. But that is why does that happen? That happens because the intellectual and the motor cylinder are just, they're disequilibrated. They're disequilibrated. And so someone who's the fourth man never doesn't do that kind of stuff, because there's balance. It's not just there's balance, there's reconnection. There's connection there. I've got to stop saying balance. Balance and equilibrium are good, but there's actual connection. We've actually become disconnected to our emotions, disconnected to our bodies, disconnected to our minds in the sense of kind of memories. And there's a line from Nietzsche where he says, in man, there's always 2 people, pride and memory. Memory says, I have done this, and pride says, no, it cannot be. And it's we're always fighting with ourselves in our heads, and then we're walking down the street and we forget where we're going, and our emotions, we're not even connected to our emotions, so we don't even know how we're feeling, if we're feeling stressed or not. To reconnect everything is to become kind of conscious of those things. So a fourth man isn't just someone who does a little bit of everything. And it's because, when people hear this concept for the first time, it's yeah, I'm kind of a fourth man. It's no, don't always assume when you enter a new system, it's always good to assume you're just at the beginning. So it's just when you look at the attributes of a fourth man, there is a certain consciousness. It's not to say that they're awake like a master, but it's more like someone who is at a certain level where they're constantly having, flashes of awakening. They're reconnected. And I would go and make the claim to say that they have no problems. That's one attribute of the fourth man. The fourth man is someone who has no problems. Not necessarily, say they have no problems, but whenever a problem arises, they can fix it. Why? Because a problem arises, and if it's a motor center problem, their motor center, they're connected, they just fix it with the correct center. A relationship problem arises, they just fix it immediately. They're connected, they realize that there's something wrong, and they're able to use the correct center to fix it. Same with the intellectual cylinder. So a fourth man is someone who has their life together and has no problems. And this, to Gurdjieff, is the type of person who's ready to start the work.
Thank you. That was interesting.
Sorry if there's a plane going by.
Yeah. Oh, I thought that was that's funny. I thought that was me.
In certain ways, it's almost like Maslow's base needs. You have to have these certain elements in place to be able to bring yourself to the point of being centered, to be able to begin the work, or to have the process to be able to learn, in that security and that sense of environment that allows and facilitates that process.
Yeah, exactly. Gurdjieff is very against kind of vagabonds and tramps. But, there's a kind of a romanticism to have like, oh, this guy's so bohemian and he lives on the street, but he says so wise things. Gurdjieff is very against that. He doesn't like you can't be an initiate and a loser. The two things aren't connected. It's like you have to have your life together.
One thing I did want to ask, anywhere in there didn't Gurdjieff have an idea of like something about machinery? Or like does that fit into any of that stuff anywhere?
Gurdjieff came up, if you think about the era, so like 1917 is when he first starts kind of, it's around like he's in Russia before the Iron Curtain falls, and then he comes into France. But like that early 19th century.
Oh, he was really around Crowley and everything too. Shit.
Yeah. And like think about that. I think he died in 1949, and I think Crowley died in 1947. So
yeah, that's when NASA started too.
They're a couple of years off, but it's like they did meet at one point, which is interesting. And we can talk about that. But the whole thing with the machine is Gurdjieff, in his cosmology and doctrine, he was around that period of time when you look at public education didn't exist, and then it did. And we all went on the Prussian system. And if you look at the period, the era that Gurdjieff is teaching in, that's kind of like first and second generation of where the masses went through a public education. So this is where the mass of people have a certain level or knowledge of science. And so science is the new hit thing. So when he came to teach, how it would have been taught in ancient times, they would have said, man is an animal, and we are part animal, part divine, and we need to become less like an animal and more divine. So Gurdjieff basically just flipped it and he scienced it up. He basically came and said, man is a machine. And people were like, ooh, machine. And then, he starts using these metaphors. Instead of centers, sometimes he would use the term cylinder, the cylinders of the human machine, the intellectual cylinder, the motor cylinder, the emotional cylinder. And he uses he has this whole thing about hydrogens as well, which isn't really hydrogen, chemical hydrogen. But it's this funny thing because what he's doing is the equivalent of, we have spiritual language, but when people get a little bit too new agey and a little bit too techno jargon fuses in it, and they go, yeah, man, you got to connect to the universal mind, man. It's all like a simulation. You got to download, unlock the DNA keys and like download from the God computer. And they'll like mix technological terms with spirituality. Gurdjieff is basically doing the equivalent of that in 1910, 1920. That's so when he's using the word machine, he's saying man is a machine and we need to become less like a machine. So like a cyclical clock, a clock just goes around and around. Same with man. We wake up and it's the daily ritual. We wake up, we do the exact same things. We, always, whenever we're leaving the house, we always grab the door handle with the exact same hand, like that kind of thing. We're predictable. And he says, it's predictable. What is a computer? Input, output. You can go outside onto the street, walk up to someone and put in a specific input. Be like, hey, screw you, man. And you'll know exactly the type of output you'll get. You'll get a punch. That's the correct output for the input that you put in. If you can predict something that's something that someone will do, they're a machine. They're mechanical. So you need to be less like a machine.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
That also reminds me of Agrippa's, like the three souls. So like the vegetative, the sensitive, and the rational, right? So like, is that sort of influencing that, or do you know where he got his ideas from?
Yes. So there is definitely something to say about that, because Gurdjieff is a little spicy on his sources. He's a little, he hides them. And a lot of people have, I think at one point they were very much like, oh, all of his sources, it's basically Tibetan Buddhism, or it's basically he was taught in a secret Chinese monastery, or it's basically Sufism. But when Gurdjieff talked, he said something like, there's one point where he said something, he admitted to something, and he said, the work, it's three things: philosophy, theory, and practice. The philosophy comes from India, the theory comes from Egypt, and the practice comes from Persia. And that's interesting to say, because he's kind of admitting that it's a synthesis. But to get to like your point, there are all of these little weird connections with like medieval alchemy and the Western tradition that people have found over time. In his second book, Meetings with Remarkable Men, it's his kind of own story. And someone pointed out that the route that he takes and travels around in Meetings with Remarkable Men is the exact same route that Christian Rosenkreuz uses in the Rosicrucian manifestos, when Christian Rosenkreuz goes to the east, and he specifically goes this route to Damascus and then goes down and then goes into and then back into Europe. It's exactly the same. It's like, that's interesting. That's interesting. And then even at one point, Gurdjieff's greatest student, in my opinion, is a guy called Ouspensky. And Ouspensky at one point says, all of Gurdjieff's cosmology comes from Robert Flood, which is a claim where a lot of Gurdjieffians will, yeah, exactly. Well, a lot of Gurdjieffians, a lot of fourth way people will be like, no, that's not correct. Ouspensky, a lot of people have problems with Ouspensky. And I'm like, that may not be entirely correct, but that's a very interesting thing to say. Right. And when you look at, there are some specific schools that I've seen where it's like, it's not exactly one-to-one, but it's like so close. There's some kind of Western esoteric lineage. And there are some things that are not confirmed at the moment, but are in the works. Some people have like found some specific sources that where Gurdjieff may have gotten it from. And it does seem to be that there is this European secret kind of undercurrent that he was tapping into.
I was just going to say,
yeah.
If he really wasn't a Flood, couldn't that like open up a door of like just so many other different influences that he might have been into?
Exactly. He definitely had some connection. Like he clearly went to, I think he went to India, and he definitely had some weird connections with maybe some fakir schools, and that's how he got these concepts. But his system seems to be some weird, it's got some Pythagorean, Neoplatonic, alchemical, hermetic influences.
Robert Flood was even big with like drawing eyeball shit and brain stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great point, Nick, because I was just going to ask, there's a sort of a 2-point question that I have for Richard, is that, so the idea is Gurdjieff had so many students that we don't quite know in the contemporary time exactly what was said by Gurdjieff and what was sort of transliterated, we'll call it, from the original source, if there is one, or if it's a lot of metafiction or like autofiction, like narratives about their guru, their sage. I'm not saying that it is all fake. I'm positing that is a sort of problematization of his material. So that's question one, or like problem one, we'll say. And then maybe part two is that, I mean, a lot of the things you said, Richard, I'm sure you know this, are very Kabbalistic. So if you're talking about Georgia, Central Asia, I mean, there is a point, like when David Heim-Smith was on this show, he talks a lot about how Sufism is a form, some kinds of Sufism are a form of Kabbalah. They may not use the tree, but they present the tree in a conceptual, sort of verbal way. And this is also my presupposition, as I've talked about for the last 3 years with Nick, is that there are other trees, like the one that I've covered on the show, which is the Mahavijja, the grouping of 10 goddesses from Nepal. So I just posit that as just a tree. It's not that they're gods or goddesses. That's not what it's about. It's about Sephardic experiences and then using a conceptual framework to map out like what experiences you've had, like Nick has talked about if you want to call it crossing the abyss experiences, that's totally fine. So what I'm trying to say is maybe it doesn't matter where his source material is if he's having Sephardic experiences based on this traditional wisdom science, whatever it may be.
The source thing is interesting. I completely agree with you. In the end, it doesn't really matter where he got it from at all. What's interesting about the sources is they open new doors to things that are incomplete. Because the way Gurdjieff taught, one thing about the work is interesting is the practices. Because usually when you talk about schools, when you say yoga, you can imagine there's certain types of meditations, or there's chakra systems that you would learn, or when you talk about qigong, you know you're going to be working with breath and energy. With the fourth way, with the way Gurdjieff taught, was very random, almost completely dependent on the person. He basically worked subjectively with each person. Like when he would give a person a practice, I think there was one quote where someone said something like, Gurdjieff told me that whenever I give a practice, what I'm giving you is a skeleton, and it's left to you for you to fill out the rest. And so it's like, it's almost, and which it's very Rosicrucian as well, because there's some kind of stories like that in other places. But it's this kind of thing of like giving a certain practice and then that other person fills it out. But when you learn about his sources, you kind of see the logic of what he was going for, and like what, because it's like when you just see the practice and it's like, well, what does that even do? But if you find the kind of the source, you can kind of trace it back and you can understand what it does and why he changed it in this specific way, and it kind of just illuminates it in a different way. So I find the sources don't really matter, but they do add an interesting dynamism to Gurdjieff. So I always like looking out, and I like hearing people's opinions and on where kind of Gurdjieff got his stuff. Some people are very measured in their approach, and some people go full schizo, and that can be fun, but often sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not. But now
never go full schizo, dude.
Nevertheless, the first question, the students and the Gurdjieff's teaching. So this is interesting because he had a lot of students and they didn't necessarily get along. Now, but here's the thing. I even saw someone in chat who was like, Ouspensky contradicts Gurdjieff, and I'm like, hold on, son. Let me explain something to you. There are two different Gurdjieffs. There's early Gurdjieff and there's late Gurdjieff. And this is the thing, like when people, you know, the Enneagram, you all heard of the Enneagram, that came from Gurdjieff. He's the first one who talked about that. He brought the Gurdjieff, he brought the Enneagram, he brought this hydrogen table system, he brought this esoteric cosmology system. It's all incomplete because he started teaching it and then he just dropped it. And this is why people have a problem with Ouspensky, because Ouspensky got the early Gurdjieff teachings. Whereas late Gurdjieff is a completely different animal. Like early Gurdjieff would say, you know, stay away from breathing practices. Don't use imagination. Late Gurdjieff actually taught breathing and imagination practices. And like all these like weird kind of, there's all these interesting things to say about him. But fundamentally, there's a book that Gurdjieff wrote, a very famous book, Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, which if you want to teach the fourth way, you have to read. I would say
we were talking about this.
Yeah. I would. I'm going to make the claim that if someone says they're a fourth way teacher and they haven't read that book, they're not a fourth way teacher, and you should just ignore everything they say.
Well, that's the only book by him that I've ever even looked at. So and a while ago, but I didn't take a kind of deeper look at it, more of an you could say an esoteric look. Right. But back when I first read it, I was really big into conspiracies and the whole, you know, I was not deep into this kind of research at all. So reading it again, you get a whole new, you're like, wow, and you still don't understand it.
Oh, there's layers and layers.
We read it on Gods of the Morning with Nick. You may have even been there.
I think for part of it, yes.
Yeah. And we were trying to interpret it. I think we did an all right job, but yeah.
There's stories of when Gurdjieff was writing that book, he would write a chapter and then he'd go to his advanced students and read the chapter out to them. And then they would then like give their interpretation. And he was like, if they get it correct, then I need to go back and write it so it's more difficult. Like he was like, you need to work for the work. There always needs to be a price paid. Nothing is for free. And so one way around that is to deliberately write something to make it hard to read. So it's literally written in that way to troll you. So you need, one attitude to have when reading that book is to try to have a sense of humor when he just repeats things and says things in all caps. It's like he's trolling you. Partially, he's giving you like amazing information, but sometimes he's trolling you and you just have to laugh and just go with it. But that book, the very end of that book, in the afterword, he says something which I actually hadn't heard until I read that. Whereas in that afterword, it's Gurdjieff then speaking. And he says there came up, because Gurdjieff, historically, he was a bit of a wild man with cars, and he had some car crashes. And basically, after his really bad car crash, he looked around at his students, and he basically says none of them had reached a stage that was like a quality good enough to carry on my lineage. Because in Ouspensky's work, the Ouspensky Gurdjieff, the Gurdjieff that speaks in Ouspensky's books, says, you need to have a fourth way teacher. This is a proper lineage thing. You receive something from the teacher. And then whereas in the Beelzebub's Tales, at the end of Beelzebub's Tales, he says, yeah, that wasn't going to work. That wasn't going to work. I realized that wasn't going to work. I dissolved the school and I'm writing this book. And then you think about that for a second. What's the book title called? Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson. Not to his son, his grandson. Who's Beelzebub? Beelzebub is clearly Gurdjieff. He's being the devil. And in that book, in the book itself, Beelzebub, meets his son Hassian on the spaceship Karnak. And he, teaches his son about where he's been and his adventures and these odd creatures on this planet Earth that he saw. But it's like, so it's an objective look from an alien looking at the Earthlings and saying how crazy they are. But who's Hassian? Hassian isn't his students. The grandchild, the grandkids are us. His students are his children, and his children are failures. He says so at the end. I failed. None of the people I taught, I've met people who are like, oh, you read Ouspensky? Oh, I'm part of the J.G. Bennett lineage. I'm the real Gurdjieff lineage. I've met people like that. And it's so funny reading out of Gurdjieff's mouth at the end of Beelzebub's. He's like, all of those guys, Araj, Fritz Peters, de Salzman, Bennett, they're all failures in my eyes.
So he really was trolling.
Wow. Yeah. So he's like, he's literally like, they're all failures. I'm writing this book for you. So Gurdjieff is speaking to us through the true initiation. He made this book as an initiatic device. So people years from now, even if you've heard of the Fourth Way and you've only got fragments of it, or you're not close to a school, you can read that book and you have enough to kind of work with. That's why he kind of wrote that book. So to answer your question, Jin, we do have all of these students and all of these people saying different stories, but then we have Gurdjieff, who himself was a trickster and he's going to lie to us. But it's almost like he's playing 5D chess and he's saying like, I'm going to like not tell the truth. So you can't take everything I say on face value. So good, don't. Be aware that I'm going to lie at you. So you're engaged, you're like conscious with every single word I say. So, and because you're in that kind of state, like, is he being real? Is he not? It kind of absorbs differently. And when he does say real shit, you lock in. It's like, oh, he's talking about higher being bodies now. He's talking about his sovereign endlessness, the God of existence. Let's go. Like, that kind of thing. You lock in when it gets real.
Well, blinds are mark of a great Kabbalist. Like if you are able to do that, if you are able to mix the ideas for different people on the path, because sometimes it's not just a lie, right? Like sometimes you explain it for a different audience. Like if I come on the show, I'm not going to go full tantric schizo all the time unless that is like the guest, right? Or sometimes I'll go like, well, Nick and I will do like Kabbalah riffing or whatever it is. It's like, it's, you suit your message to the audience or to like who you're speaking to. So that's, this is the one thing is that in Tantric Buddhism, we often say like it's skillful, like it's upaya, it's skillful means. It's not necessarily a lie. Yeah. It's just different people are going to have different things to understand. And,
100% Gurdjieff was very fond of using skillful means. The sly man. Sometimes he called the Fourth Way the path of the sly man. That was the other term he used. Sly, S-L-Y.
I wanted to mention, Richard, you answered my question. What would have been my question? But I wanted to mention at least some of the things that may have inspired his ideas, or at least correspond with the idea. There's the 3 jewels of Buddhism that kind of transform into a fourth or combination synthesis of higher kind of ascension. Gurdjieff reminds me of so many Kung Fu and Tai Chi teachers that I've experienced, that he's just completely uncanny. and kind of you never know exactly what he might mean. He also used the term, as you eloquently described, and he summarized it maybe in the three-brained people or three-brained beings. And this reminds me of the related to Kung Fu and Tai Chi. There's the three centers or three dantians, main dantians in Kung Fu theory, which basically exactly describes the fakir, monk, and yogi in the physical, root-based dantian and the emotional and mental. And it all kind of, and there's also the Jing, Qi, and Shen forces of Qigong and Tai Chi and Kung Fu that are kind of similar to this idea as well. And so there's also the triune brain, which is kind of a scientific theory to look at it, which I believe it kind of was theorized after Gurdjieff. So I wonder how much he might have influenced that. But it also all beckons to this idea of the Trismegistus, and even being, I hope not too abstract, there's the Hiram Abiff kind of initiation process where he essentially overcomes the ignorance, fear, and superstition model, and becomes by overcoming these three forces, it becomes in effect a fourth man or a fourth way being.
And that's Ethan, the fourth initiate, dude.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly.
I was gonna ask, dude, is there
saying,
anything like that has to do with that? Did you read?
Yeah, totally. And I think those kind of illustrate the similarity of that 3 to 4 process, and even Jung kind of might have hinted on it in something that he said frequently. There are 3, but where's the 4th? And pointing out different sets of 3 and 4 to his remark there. So I don't know. I don't know if those all point to where he got any of his ideas, but just a similar process in theory anyway.
Yeah, he has very interesting similar vibes to certain things. In a way, his early work, like the Ouspensky Gurdjieff, I would say is almost lacking. The Ouspensky Gurdjieff is almost lacking in a certain way that it seems intentional. And I've had this thought that like early Gurdjieff intended his work to be supplementary. So like you take this and then you go and like join a Taoist school and you can do fourth way and Taoism, and it just fits together because it fits together so well. Or like you go fourth way and then you go Zen school and it just fits together really well, or fourth way and Raja, and it fits together really well. But his later work seems to be a self-enclosed system in and of itself. And yeah, there does seem to be, it's always hard when things seem to be like, the chakras and the dantians, and because with the chakras, there is also a kind of thing like Gurdjieff has the centers of the human machine. He has the first 5. He says there's the motor, emotional, and intellectual, but then he says there's an instinctual center, which is connected to the motor center. And then he says there's a sexual center, so there's 5. And it's funny, when he taught this, he would have like different groups of students. And in one group of students, he would just say the first 3. He'd say like intellect, motor, emotion. And then in one, he'd include the instinct. And then in another, he'd include the sexual cylinder. And then he'd like get them all to come together one day. And then they just exchange notes, and there'd be mass confusion because of like there'd be like some people would only be working with 3 centers and some would have like all 5. And it's interesting. It's like almost like the person who could sort out through the differences, sift out through the differences, was the person who could make it almost. But there's also talk of higher cylinders. And he says there's 2 higher centers. So when you have 5 plus 2 is 7, then it's like, oh, is this the chakras? Is he talking about the chakras? But then he talks about the 3 brains, which is kind of like the 3 dantians. And I've wondered the exact same things as you. But when fundamentally with those things, with the chakras, it's a little controversial because when they started off, they're just seats for the gods. But fundamentally, the Dantian system, at least, and nowadays how people see chakras, is an energetic system. And in the early days, it's hard because Gurdjieff in the early days seemed to be about doing something, and he'd be against kind of contemplating and don't use imagination practices and breathing practices, don't worry about them yet. But there's weird kind of things, and it seems to be he was focused on trying to get the work with the consciousness in and of itself, and then elaborate this huge cosmology. And just via working with the consciousness itself, it would have an energetic effect. And there's a logic for that, which is a very hard, it's not hard to explain, but it's very elaborate, and will just, it's to do with the hydrogen system, basically, his concept of hydrogens. But fundamentally, if someone is in his system, if someone's able to self-remember what he calls for a long enough period and consistently, just that conscious work would transform the energies in and of itself, and it would just kind of work. Whereas later on, he seemed to add in contemplation exercises and a breathing exercise and some using a color spectrum exercise. And he seemed to be kind of more actively working with the energies. So this is just why I'm kind of qualifying that, because it's like early on, it didn't seem to be that he was moving energies through the body, but he was using some kind of framework like that. So it was kind of there, but it was distinct. But anyway, I'm just rambling now.
Sorry, I got a quick follow-up for you, Richard. I'll be really fast. Okay. So in Tantra, the secret layer is that we use 5 chakras. So maybe he was onto something there. That is both the oldest layer of what people know as chakras is 5. Mm-hmm. It's also the esoteric element of it is 5. So we'll just say that. And then the 3 dantians, yes, you can definitely make that argument, but I also you can say the 3 body problem. Like that's how we would, I think Kaiva probably could go into this too, but the 3 body problem in Buddhism, like there's like a higher ontological body, cosmological body, and obviously a material body. So you can resolve that through consciousness. And I wonder, like the thing you're saying about how he began with doing consciousness exercises, like that was his primary thing. That sounds exactly to me, like someone who's just come off a Sephirotic journey, because they're going to focus they're more able to access the centers. So they're not going to focus so much on the energy, the subtle body channels, like the up and down, the plus and the ultra. They're not going to focus so much on that because they've already accomplished that journey once or several times or however many it is. So they're just going to focus on the energy centers and getting them turning in the right direction, working, and sort of like energetically engaging with them in perception of consciousness, which is the whole point. But then he realizes as he goes on that people's energy centers are actually pretty fucked up. And so they actually require the breathing, what we call like tumo, or like all those like Adi yoga practices. And then also like movement, he's adding in the specific visualization, which I think is really interesting because you can also do that with the Sephira, obviously. And you can sort of work your way through the densities. And you can also say in like more traditional Kabbalah, especially if we're looking at like Rabbi Cordovero, we're talking about pardes, so 5 density system. That is like the secret layer. Of course, you can say there are 7 densities, just like you can say there are 7 chakras. Because there are 2 at the exoteric layer, but that can also be resolved in the more inner esoteric. Anyways, I'll shut up. But I great points. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's good.
Yeah. I was just going to say one thing about the 5 as well is like there's 5 planets and 2 luminaries, right? So it's like, that also kind of ties in with that. And then I also like when you talk about the consistency of like a person, like that is also like in Buddhism, there's the 10 factors. And so like to remain like consistent in your attaining of your Buddhist identity, your Buddhist practice, it's like the consistency from beginning to end. But there is relations in between. So I can understand like maybe he starts out wanting people to just be consistent. Like just be on that consistent flow of like attaining that enlightenment, but then understanding your relationships to the world around you. You need those practices to kind of change your essentially your energy so that you have a different relationship with the external forces outside of you, you know? So it's like, because you have to overpower those things, right? So then you do need those practices so that you can change your frequency, not be manipulated by other things. So it is interesting, like how, you know, Jin kind of talks about how it ties into Buddhism as well, and also astrology too.
Yeah, that is interesting. That is interesting. One thing that Jin said about the bodies as well, because that was, you could say, Gurdjieff's main aim was for man to crystallize a causal body. Because I think this is more me leaning on the general Western esoteric tradition, but with causal bodies, or the higher being bodies, Gurdjieff didn't. He said that it's not a given. Most people actually don't have higher being bodies, and like you could say like Steiner when he talks about higher being bodies of animals. Like animals don't have their own causal body. Like there's just a causal body for the entire species of an animal, or a group of animals will just share one causal body, funnily enough. And so it's almost like we're a part of this mass. We're not differentiated. And the work is that to actually differentiate ourselves and to become a true individual. And that is to crystallize higher being bodies, to crystallize our own astral body, which can survive death, and our own causal body, which can go to the center of the universe and we can meet his sovereign endlessness and high five or whatever. Can I just also say one thing? I just want to turn to the chat and look at some slander that I saw through my peripheral vision. Crowbuck said at one point, yeah, the whole thing about Gurdjieff's cosmology, it's completely metaphorical. No, wrong. Read Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson. His entire cosmology is intertwined and interlinked and meshed together so much with his anthropology, which is meshed into his psychology, which is then meshed into his praxis. It's all interconnected. That's actually the beauty of his system. Everything is interconnected. So actually, it does matter. And you're wrong, Crowbar. No, anyway, I just wanted to address that. But yes, higher being bodies. And so that's one thing that's different about Gurdjieff. In some systems, they say man already has these higher being bodies and we need to learn to reuse them. Gurdjieff is like, nah, you don't even have them. We got to start from square one. We got to start from nothing.
One thing I wanted to ask, I don't know if you know of this practice. Maybe, I don't know if anybody on the show maybe knows of it. The middle pillow ritual, that has 5 chakras. Find that to be, I haven't really heard of any. I didn't even know, so that's the only time I heard of the 5. So hearing this again, I was like,
yeah, the middle pillar is based on the what is it, the tree of life. So he would have just used the middle ones. I guess it's the what is it, Malkuth, Yesod, Tippereth, Dart, and Keter to achieve the middle pillar. So it makes sense. That's
most powerful.
Yeah, that is interesting, actually. It's good. It's hard because early day Gurdjieff really wasn't into that kind of stuff, but he seems to use the framework. That would have been
around his time for sure. That was actually, isn't the story that like, I guess the Golden Dawn would have been around using that prior to probably him, correct?
I thought what is Israel Regardie really pioneered that, and it was very basic.
Okay.
I'm not sure. You're gonna have to get Ike. Call up Ike real quick.
No. You're right. I think that is a purely Israel Regardie. You're correct.
But no, it's the framework is there, but it's like there's more than one ways to skin a cat, is what I like to say. And so, like to crystallize a higher being body, to crystallize an astral body, some people will say you need to use tantra, you need to use sexual tantra, only dual cultivation, whereas other people like, no, there's an alchemy only using Mercury technique, which you can use, or you can to crystallize higher being bodies, or you can do this with this specific way or that specific way. It's like there's different routes up the mountain kind of thing. And so Gurdjieff seemed to be using a similar framework to a lot of other people, but he was avoiding their style and their techniques for whatever reason.
It's interesting. I mean, that could be for many reasons, though. You could have thought like the order might have sucked and you didn't want him getting influenced by him, or you could even flip that and you could be like, I don't want anybody to know where this comes from, so they only come to me.
he really seemed to have a thing against imagination exercises early on. He was really against that. And I kind of understand where he's coming from, because like the line between imagination and fantasy can be quite blurry for some people. And I find like a lot of people who do like visualization exercises, there are some people who go full schizo. It's like it's too much for them. And they do a visualization exercise and they come back the next day being like, yes, I am a reincarnation of Jesus. That's true. That's me.
You just go through Instagram, you see that shit all day.
Yeah. Those things are both Neptunian as well. So it's like when people have strong Neptunes in their chart, like they really do have to distinguish between fantasy and your imagination and how to gear it in the right direction. So when I work with people that have a strong Neptune, that's like one thing I always have to help them with is like, make sure your mind is in the right spot, because your greatest fears are also part of your fantastical imaginal realm. So it is interesting. I think it is important to have like a really grounded state before you even touch that area, for sure.
That was really great, Kaiva. Sorry. I just wanted to say that I was thinking that the whole time, but you touched on it in the planetary way, like Neptune, but I would call it Hokmah. Like I would say that's the imaginal realm. That is where like the smoky wisdom obviously exists in the space of your mind. So that is like where the flux is, where all like the particulates of the ideas and the words. It's over conceptualization when you concretize those things. And that's why he avoided it. It makes a lot of sense. It's like how people do Dzogchen or Zen practice before they undertake more esoterica. So they can like learn to do the sitting, learn to hit the primordial ground, the 5, the Yasod. Because in Tantra, we would actually reposition Yasod as the 5 rather than as the 9. So it's kind of interesting like that too. If you think about it, that's the primordial ground. You're going to go up to Tiferet. You want to go through the secret letter of Samech, right? How do you do that? Well, Samech is also an arrow. It's very interesting.
Interesting.
Thank you.
I didn't know that you could actually relate the Kabbalah tree of life to the planets.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's part of the Hermetic
Talk to me
Kabbalah.
about that sometime, Mr. Jin.
I'm pretty good at the Sefer Yetzirah.
Yeah.
So do you work much with the planets and stuff like that? Or like what is his cosmology and that kind of stuff?
So his cosmology is somewhat interesting. He doesn't work with the planets in the sense of like in a ritual magic. He's kind of against that in the sense of you need to, like in a hermetic way. It's like the Hermetists say you need to what do you say? Get out of the influence of the planets. You need to develop yourself so you're released from the influence of the planets. That's more his take when he talks about planets. So he'll talk about being and different levels of being. And he'll say, man is at a specific mass. And so when the planetary rays and forces hit the world, that men act in a specific way and wars happen because of different planetary conjunctions. And so when you differentiate yourself, you go above that level. So the energies from the planets, it's not that they don't hit you, but you rise above the effects on the mass man, and you're no longer under those laws anymore. You're beholden to a different set of laws. You're a different quality. Ontologically, you're a different quality of human. So that's how he kind of views the planets, not necessarily as negative, but because most people are beholden to normal person consciousness or NPC, they can't transform the planetary energies and just problems happen. So via developing the consciousness, you can rise above that. When he talks about planets, he does talk about them in his cosmology. He talks about a reciprocal nourishment, that everything is connected, and things that happen in the stars affect the Earth, but then those effects on the Earth have wild effects that can then have certain effects in the universe as well. So because things are interconnected, that shows it's not necessarily we're special, but it shows that attention is placed on Earth. And angels do come down to fix and do maintenance on things, because if they don't, It'll create catastrophe throughout the universe because everything is interconnected. And it's a part of understanding that interconnectedness is then understanding, you could say, the escape mechanism, because it's like, how do you escape then? Or how do you develop yourself then? How do you work with or against the system? As an individual, it's very difficult. But you also can't save the world. Those people who are like, we're going to save everyone, we're going to enlighten, we're all going to go to the fifth dimension. Gurdjieff was like, no, not going to happen. He was basically like, only if it's one person, one person, no. Everybody, no. But a group of people working together, now you can do something. And just that group, just that kind of group. So in a sense, he was a bit of a spiritual elitist, but via working in a specific way to feed the planets, and this is where the Loosh, his version of Loosh comes in, which he calls a Skoken. And the whole concept of this was man in prehistoric times would release Loosh or a Skoken naturally. But because of our degeneration, there's actually a whole kind of thing to do with like Kunda buffer and the bifurcation of the consciousness. But to speed run this, at one point in time, we were cool, and we were just releasing, we were transformers for energy. We would receive cosmic energy and we'd transform it naturally and just release this. And some of it would stick into us and become our higher being bodies. And then some of it would be emitted ambiently and go back into the ever-present like cycle and generation of all planets. Nowadays, that doesn't happen. We're just solid, we're egoic, energy comes in and it just gets stuck and it doesn't transform. It's like a dead weight. And so the only time energy is transformed is either in times of great emotional turmoil, i.e., when you're in great pain, or, in great bouts of ecstasy, or when you die, a large amount of energy is basically released. So this is another reason why, because Earth is like a sieve, well, it's not Earth is like a sieve. Humanity acts no longer like a transformer, more like a sieve that just blocks energy. So the planets force wars to kind of happen so that people will die and a Skoken or Loosh will be released.
Dude, nature
to help the universal economy.
Yeah.
Nature loves us. Nature loves
It
us.
does love us, but it's also very brutal.
But she also doesn't care about our development. She's just happy with how it's going. Whereas if we want to rise above this, we do need to pay a tithe to nature. And fundamentally, via transforming energies within us, that Loosh or a Skoken is like separated from the elements and is released. But because it's separated, those then are the elements we can use to crystallize higher being bodies. So his system is interconnected with his cosmology, because the cosmology states that we're in this horrific cycle set up by archons, which in his system, the angels are kind of fuck-ups. In his system, he has God, and God is technically good, but everything below God is relative and purely relational. So some angels will appear like tyrants to us, and some will be more friendly. But fundamentally, they goofed. They completely goofed and just set this system up to kind of keep the universe going. They're bad maintenance men, and we arise. A part of the reason of crystallizing higher astral and higher causal body is we can either go back to the sun absolute where God is, or we can help out with world maintenance and world creation and maintenance. We can help out with like making the world better in that way from a higher level. And that's very interesting, because this also sets him apart from something like Sufism, where it's like the annihilation of the self is the point. In Gurdjieff's cosmology, it's like, no, there needs to be if you're going to have something that's doing world maintenance, there needs to be something, and there needs to be a kind of a personality to pilot that. So in Gurdjieff's system, the personality doesn't dissolve. You're actually immortalizing it in a sense. You're actually
right.
Yeah, it's more there's almost like two different spiritualities: dissolution and then coagulation. And he's more on the coagulating higher being bodies. Deification, I'm not sure if he would never use that term. It's not about becoming a god or something. but fundamentally you're becoming something permanent so you can perpetuate yourself in the universe and help God, help relieve the suffering of God, is what he says, which is interesting. We relieve God's suffering by doing the work.
Well, the story you related is found in the Brahmanda Purana, which is was written in the 3rd century, retranslated in about the 5th. But it talks about this exact thing, like how we need to, well, the world is in a half an eggshell. And so you have to tip it one way or the other to sort of get the souls out. When there's too much sin, it overflows. Sort of like that sieve metaphor you gave. And I also love that you brought up the Sufi tie to Gevra. I've talked about this many times, like the Islamic preference is to Mars or Gevra, or you could say to Ketu, because it's like the illusion of spiritual liberation through material liberation. So like the death of the body will actually grant you spiritual liberation. But as Luria said, there is a secret path between Gevra and Hokmah. So it brings back to the point of Kaiva saying about Neptune and sort of keeping the cycle going, because that's exactly what it would do, because that's the most active sort of creative Sephiroth after Keter, right? But if you're going middle pillar, you need more impulse, you need more force, like you were saying, the thrusting of the arrow. So hopefully you would never need to go to the extreme of the right hand or the extreme of the left. You could actually bring it together in synthesis, in the 5th sort of perception of consciousness.
The middle path.
Exactly.
It's very interesting.
I have a question. You were mentioning his editing style kind of integrated more work into the work, if you will. And it would seem to me that he instituted stress and confusion as part of his dancing and movements or whatever. I wonder maybe if you could touch on that and maybe even share an example of some of the things that he would share with people to do.
Yeah. So this is one of the more controversial points of Gurdjieff, is he was a bit of a bastard. Like, you know, he there's stories of, because it's like, you know, you don't get anything for free. So what happens? What happens if you just stumble upon the work? Well, then it needs to be made hard, in a sense. That's how he kind of saw it. It's that there needs to be this time to be paid. And so he would often do some of these things where he'd make certain commands, or he'd have certain practices. I'm not sure if you could call it a practice. With some people, he'd tell them to do something and it would change their character fundamentally, but it would also kind of break them. So like one guy, he was like, you need to stop smoking. And this guy was a chronic smoker his entire life. It's like, stop smoking. That's your spiritual practice that I'm giving you. Stop smoking. And the guy, like, stressing out, you know, changing, you know, going through all the motions that smokers do, you know, throwing away all his cigarettes and then like stressing out. And then he finds one like under the couch that he missed a couple of days later. And he's like, no, I can't. And like, you know, this guy's life was made a living hell just via this one practice, just via this one stress. And it's like he had to like stop it. And then he like came to Gurdjieff and was like, I can't do it. It's like, please give me another practice. Like, no, you need to quit smoking. You need to do this. And it's like, and then it's like, and he tried. And then eventually at one point he quit and he was like good for a couple of months. And Gurdjieff's like, no, you haven't truly quit yet. Do this, you know, go off and come back. And it's like, you know, he relapsed at a point. He's like, no, Gurdjieff was right. And he tried. And then like after like 2 years, or like after some years, he eventually came back to Gurdjieff and was like, I'm a changed man. I finally done it. And Gurdjieff looked at him and was like, yes, I see now. You've changed. And then Gurdjieff was like, your next spiritual practice is this. And he reaches into his pocket and he pulls out a pack of cigarettes and puts it on the table. Now smoke the entire pack. And it's this like, oof. Because, you know, you think about it, it's like, this is the teaching of not to be too far one way or the other. It's like, if you're too loose, he's just a degenerate. And so he's teaching him to be staunch and strict, so strict like iron that he breaks the addiction. But now he's strict like iron, and that's a barrier. And so it's like the thing that saved him, that pulled him out of being like addicted to smoking, is now a barrier, and now that needs to be dissolved. And it's just, you hear that story and you just feel for the guy, like, oh, imagine the pain of like then smoking those cigarettes, like like also like the guilt and the like, oh, it, like that would also, thinking about Gurdjieff, like clearly he would be laughing while this would be happening. Like he was a bit of a bastard. Let's not mince words here. Like there are stories of him being a nice guy. There are stories of him like when he died, all of a sudden, all these people from like orphanages and charities just came to his funeral, and everyone was like, "Who are you guys?" Like no one knew he was donating all of these things. Like there are stories of him, Gurdjieff the good guy, but there are some stories where it's like Gurdjieff the absolute savage, and he would do things like that to people, like really break them. Like not just the teach, you know, we can get the teaching. You can give the teaching intellectually of, oh, don't be one way and don't be the other way, be in the middle. But he embedded that teaching in the guy's body, basically. And that's how harsh he could be in that sense.
I saw somebody in the chat mention the ray of creation. You know what
Yes.
About?
So Gurdjieff had a lot of terms. So he used the term ray of creation, but then the ray of creation is the thing that comes from the absolute. So when you look at Kabbalah, when you look at a generic Western Hermetic Kabbalah poster, and you see the absolute, you see the Ein Sof, and then you see the spheres, and there's usually the lightning bolt going through the spheres, that's the ray of creation. So in his system, it comes from the absolute. It's in his system, it's weird because there's God, but then all of a sudden there's ether, there's primordial matter. And basically out of the absolute, the ray of creation shines into the ether, and you get arising, you get process, you get worlds appearing. So he has words, all terms for all these things and how they write. Yeah. His term for the ray of creation later on is Okidanok. And of course, the different arisings are the Heptaparaparshanok, the law of 7, and creation happens in 3, the law of Triamazi Kamno. And he gets wild. He creates a whole new almost language, basically, of Beelzebub talking to Hassian. Of course, they're going to use alien language. And they have all of these, what are called neologisms, all of these new terms that you have to kind of like learn and adapt to. And that almost in and of itself, I think, is some kind of esoteric practice as well. Because the way he structures words, like you'll read it and it like trips up your tongue. It's almost as if he puts a bunch of vowels and then all of a sudden like 3 consonants next to each other to make you go, it's almost like as you're saying the word, your voice has to take a right turn. It's hard to describe, but when if you've read Beelzebub, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's these words he uses have these specific terms. But that one, the ray of creation, is fundamentally this thing that comes into the universe, comes into the ether, arises everything. And we have the ray of creation within us. It descends, but then do we have it? It descends, but then it needs to return. And so there's this splitting that happens and this multiplicity. And now we're a multiplicity and we're trying to bring things together, cut off some elements, refine other elements. There are all Gurdjieff terms for this. The Jat-Klom principle of dissolution. And there's such weird terms, man. Like you can't. And then the bringing of it together and us reascending up the ray of creation and back into the absolute.
I like that. No, I had ideas of maybe that was possibly Kabbalistic. That's what it made me think of. I wasn't necessarily thinking the way you would explain it makes sense, but for some reason I was thinking about like Netzach going to Hod, where there's like that kind of like a rainbow or going over. Which is just my opinion. If we didn't have color, I don't know how dense or how descriptive this world would look. You know, I think it's a huge part of the Matrix, if you want to look at it like that. You know, like it starts giving shade, you get depth, you get all sorts of stuff. Yeah. But the way you said it makes total sense. I always think of like some sort of like rainbow ray coming out. 7
That
going.
makes total sense. What you're saying, Nick. The diamond of Venus. Sorry.
Sorry.
about that.
No, go ahead.
No, that makes total sense. Like exactly what you're saying. Like I'm following along. Like you're seeing the light hit the diamond at Netzach. You can say that because that is the Jyotish stone for Venus. So you're seeing like the resplendent ray go into the cut diamond. It's refracting into Hod. In Tantra,
it's like the
right,
pink.
and then exactly, yeah.
Yeah, dark side of the moon. That's exactly how I picture that experience, or whatever that's going on right there. That's funny.
So someone in chat said, Lamau, Gurdjieff sounds like an Eastern European dad. And I'm like, yeah, he was. That's exactly what he was.
Did anybody have any questions before I ask another one? I did have another question I wanted to ask.
I have an actual question.
Yeah.
Millenarianism and Gurdjieff. This is like a big, I know it's a huge, you just answer it in your way, Richard, like whatever way. There's no expectation. But, you know, this is a big question because a lot of like left-hand path people practice Gurdjieff, as well as you were saying, it's very easily adoptable to different systems. And there's a lot of millenarian thinking around Ouspensky, and because Ouspensky is obviously very much tied to Gurdjieff, they have this like, well, Jason Giorgiani talks a lot about this. It's obviously not exactly the same, but it's a version. It is a version of what Ouspensky was saying, and sort of Gurdjieff also alluded to, at least some of his students said, of like a kind of world catastrophe. And some people, I'm not saying I believe it. I don't believe this. Okay, so I'm nobody get mad at me, but I'm just saying that some people do believe that we are undergoing like a pole shift in like 2030. This is obviously what Jason talks a lot about. There was an astrological thing in 2020. Actually, there was a reversal of the poles of Rahu and Ketu. So they would normally Rahu normally eclipses the moon, but in 2020 there was like a vernal eclipse that eclipsed the sun, and then also Ketu usually eclipses the sun, but in this time it eclipsed the moon. So that in Tantra that would signal a kind of pole shift. So what I'm saying is I think it's conceptual personally, but a lot of people have tied it to actual like pole shift of the world. So the coasts are gonna, evaporate or whatever. I don't know. So just address it in. Sorry, that was meandering, but address it in your way, Richard. Thank you.
Yeah, Gurdjieff did not have a very good view of the coming ages. He saw everything in a continuous degeneration. So it's like, as my understanding of millenarianism, it's like the coming times, and it's like he wasn't promoting a golden age at all. Because like when he talks about prehistory and like Atlantis, and he'll talk about that kind of culture, it's degeneration. Like each time, something was lost and coming down, and then prehistory Babylon, and then historical Babylon, and at different periods, different masters would be sent to kind of pick man up again, but because of man's but man's tendency of reciprocal destruction and the insanity that would there's this insanity that comes over man to also destroy things of the past, the tearing down statues and things like that. He says that is because of that, objective science is always lost. Like a guy will come, Jesus, Buddha, he gives his own kind of names. He has one guy called Ashyata Shaimash, who is the greatest savior of humanity, who seems to be a composite being, in my opinion. A lot of people are trying to figure out what Gurdjieff meant by Ashyata Shaimash, who he was in the past. Like some people say it was Zarathustra. To me, it seems like he's a combo of Zarathustra, Hermes Trismegistus, and Moses. Like when he talks about that guy, it's really, really interesting. This is another thing. Sometimes Gurdjieff will speak literally, sometimes metaphorically, sometimes it'll be like two different stories that are true mashed together with a little bit of flavor on top. Like that's how kind of Gurdjieff writes. But after all of this, it's like things just get worse and worse and worse. At one point in time, he claims that there was no subconscious on man. It was just consciousness, and then there was a bifurcation, and then there's the subconsciousness, and then the subconscious grew bigger, and then certain being impulses that we had in our consciousness were corrupted and certain other ones were not lost, but were sealed in the subconsciousness. And it's just like we've gotten worse and worse and worse, and it's more mechanical and more mechanical until we reach modern day. And fundamentally, at the end of Beelzebub's Tales, he basically says something like, the only way that you could help humanity as a whole is if you genetically attached put a new organ into humans that would constantly remind them of their death. And it's like, that would be the only way to save the world. Other than that, they're screwed. And you can only save a few at a time by giving them the work. And so he doesn't have there's going to be a golden age, there's going to be a renaissance. He's just like, nah, this would be the only way to save humanity, but it's not going to happen. So get a small group of people who you think are cool, do the work together, and that's the best you can hope for.
All right.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, how do we even know that we are all meant to be enlightened beings anyways? You know, like this idea that like everybody is even coherent or even aware of their journey. How many people are just like NPC characters, and they're just here to like, you know, channel whatever spirits that we need? Because in like Buddhism, right, like we have these karmic relationships with everything in our reality to teach us, right, so that we can clear our karma and change the causes and have different effects. So it is interesting to think about, you know, maybe we're not all meant to be, or maybe not everybody's meant to be enlightened or saved, or maybe they're not even conscious. Who knows, you know? So I can agree with that. I can agree with what he's saying, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
It's hard, right? Because it's like you and I have talked about this, Kaiva. Like I believe in like Buddha nature. I believe that like even the most NPC can be at least a little bit karmically cleared for their next go round. But people can only, it's like how Richard was talking about how Gurdjieff emphasized praxis, and like how you and I have discussed this is like in Buddhism, praxis is everything. So it's like, how do you get people there? Well, only the person can be an agent of their own practice.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you if you knew about with Gurdjieff. Did he get into anything with music or sound?
Yes. He had his part of his cosmology and his early energetic system is connected to diatonic, basically the sound music theory, which is that's a hell of a thing to kind of go through. But because he uses the law of 7, when he says things are created via the law of 3, affirming, denying, and reconciling, these forces are everywhere. You know, 3 gunas, 3 primary forces, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. There's an affirming force, a denying force, and a reconciling force. You know, like Chokma, Bina, and Keter. When things are created, they then go through process. And the process is the law of 7, Heptaparaparshanok. And when he first talks about that in the early days with Ouspensky, he basically uses the sound scales. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si. And he uses numbers as well. Martinism, Rosicrucian, OTO, Bota, Golden Dawn temples. There's definitely an esoteric school in your city if you look online. Thank you, Nulu. He uses that, and he also uses math, specifically arithmetic, to talk about different densities of energy. And so in the early days, he'll say, like, the food you eat is at a certain density. It's at, oh, geez, off the top of my head, I'm not sure if he says, like, air is, like, 192. But then even impressions come into, you know, like you breathe in, that's, you know, atoms are going into you. Even impressions have a weight, and that weight is like 48. It has the weight of hydrogen 48, whereas your air is hydrogen 192. Food, I think food is like 376 or something like that, 378. They all have different densities, and they go into your body and transform along the musical scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si. Why he talks about that is because of octaves. So the best way to talk about this is, on a piano has 52 keys, but if you cut off the 2 keys on either end, it's 49. So that's 7 times 7. You have 7 octaves on a piano. So it's really easy to look at that. The white keys are the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si. What are the black keys? The black keys are semitones. And you'll notice, so it's placed between do and re is a semitone. Between re and mi is a semitone. So between the white keys is a black key, but there's not one black key for every white key. So between do, re, mi, between mi and fa is a missing black key. There's no black key. And then do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, and between si and the do of the next octave is also a missing black key. It's like, where are the black keys? There are no black keys in creation in these places in the octave. So an octave being 8, notes from do to do. So there are 2 missing semitones. Basically, Gurdjieff says when things are created and then they start going through process, where there's a missing semitone, it just bends or it just stops. Sometimes it'll stop or sometimes it'll bend. And this is why in nature things bend and spiral, because it will start to go up and then it will hit the missing semitone. And if nothing fulfills that semitone, it'll just kind of curve. He also talks about this so in the body, when you eat food, it starts to dissolve. But when it reaches a missing semitone, nature fills in that gap because it needs to. Otherwise, we'd just die. Well, otherwise we wouldn't be able to reproduce because the food hydrogen do 378 or whatever, I hope I'm not losing you guys, eventually transforms, goes do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, and ends up as C12, which is sexual energy. So if nature didn't fill in the missing semitone within us, we wouldn't have any sexual energy and we wouldn't be able to reproduce. But she does, and because she wants us around. She may not want us to leave and escape, but she wants us around. So she fills in that missing semitone automatically. We get C12. We get a 12 hydrogen, which is great. But there are other hydrogens in our body that hit the missing semitone and then they just don't progress. But if they did progress, they would start to develop something else. So like our air, which is hydrogen do 192, it goes do, mi, re. So when it automatically transforms from do to mi. So it will go hydrogen 192 to hydrogen, 98? And then it will go, so mi 98 and then re 40, no, I think it's 96 and then re 48. Yeah, something like that. This is off the top of my head, so I'm doing math while I'm talking. But basically, air will transform down to this, but then it just stops there. It just stops in your body at a certain level, at what Gurdjieff would say, at density 48. But if you do breathing exercises and transform it, it continues along. And it eventually reaches a density of 6. This is the only time you see a 6 hydrogen in the human body. And the reason why that's important is because in Gurdjieff's system, your centers, your intellectual, your emotion, and your motor center work off different hydrogens. They have different refinements of hydrogens. So your intellectual center likes hydrogen 48. Your emotional center likes hydrogen 24. Your motor center can work off hydrogen 96. But your higher cylinders, or your sexual cylinder works off hydrogen 12. It's the sexual energy. The higher centers that Gurdjieff talked about, the higher functions, they only work on hydrogen 6. So his whole kind of music theory is connected to energy transformation, but also things in the universe are kind of tier ranks. Like he'll say like coming out of the absolute is hydrogen 6. It's the most refined hydrogen. Then hydrogen 12 and hydrogen 24, there's nothing in the universe that corresponds to them, or there are things, but science hasn't found them because they're too rarefied. And then he would say like hydrogen 48 is pure impressions. Hydrogen 96 is kind of like ether. Someone who hasn't, I like to say like if you yourself have a surplus of hydrogen 96, you know, in anime, if you ever watch an anime and there's a sexy character and they have sparkles, those sparkles are hydrogen 96. That's what 96 is. Hydrogen 96 is animal magnetism to Gurdjieff. And then it's like, then the next one is air, then the next one's water, and then human food? Anything that a human can eat and digest is like hydrogen 378. I think that's correct. And then underneath that would be organic objects that can't be eaten, so like wood. And then be lower than that would be like metals. And then there's also 2 even denser ones after that. So he has this number system connected to the diatonic sound system that he uses, and it's connects to his cosmology, which connects to his energy theory, and the whole point of the energies is also to transform to get higher being bodies. To get higher being bodies, you need to go up octaves. It's complicated.
That's wild. That's some in-depth shit right there. Yeah. I knew he was into some stuff with music. I didn't know it was that crazy.
If you
Sorry, sorry about that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's very... It even gets even more complicated, because when he'll say a hydrogen is created out of something, it's created out of a carbon, a nitrogen, and an oxygen. And when you hear that, you're like, what the fuck? Hold on a second. Hydrogen is created out of a carbon, an oxygen, and nitrogen? And when he says that to Ouspensky, it's in a group, and Ouspensky says, another person asks, does this have to do with Western alchemy? And he says, yes, I'll explain it to you later, and then refuses to elaborate and never does. But if you look at that for a second, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, what's oxygen? It's air, right? What's a carbon? It's a dense, you think something dense, it's earth. What's nitrogen? Nitrogen, ignition, nitrogen explodes, nitroglycerin, fire, earth, fire, air. And then you can kind of think alchemy. You think of a beaker with a fire, the nitrogen, and then there's some substance, an organic substance in it, the carbon, and then the fire's heating it up and it creates a vapor, oxygen, and then the vapor condenses into what? Hydrogen, the water. So when he says hydrogen, he's not talking about on the elemental table hydrogen. He's literally talking about some kind of substance that's alchemically transformed in nature. And you have hydrogens in you, or you have these alchemical waters that you work with. It seems, if we're talking alchemy, it seems Gurdjieff, I'm not sure what he did for himself, but the path he walked, or he teaches, is the wet path in Western alchemy. This path of cultivating the waters and then dissolving things in the waters. The slower path, whereas the dry path is more fiery. But then at other times, it seems there's a bit of fire.
The path between Bina and Hokmah. Because it can go either way, right? It can be plus or ultra. You can be walking towards the heat, because Gevra heats Bina, just like you're saying. It's like the flame, right? That's hitting the bottom of the earth, heating that vessel, that high density vessel. And it also corresponds to the sound. That's what I was going to say, is like Fraternitatis Saturni, right? Or whatever, Saturnitas. That's what it is. That's like with the octaves of the names of Saturn, and moving through the most difficult densities of your life, which are just like emotional or traumatic or whatever consciousness events. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And like that path can be one of fire, or it can be one of air if you're moving towards Hokmah, right? Because you're moving towards the post-conceptual destruction of the world. So the world will be destroyed, and that's why it's all smoky, like Neptunian, like Kaiva said. It's submerged in the deeper supernal waters.
Yeah, and then it's also like what you talked about at the beginning, the 3 bodies, right? And 3 is always 1, right? So it is interesting that 3 always equals that final 1. So the 3 carbon, nitrogen, oxygen being the 1 hydrogen. And does that tie into that 3-body thing then? Is that like, what you talked about at the beginning, or wasn't it 3-body? What was it at the beginning again?
We have a planetary body, an astral body, and a causal body.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is that like his part of like teaching it that way or something?
Yeah, at first, he basically says to get an astral body, you need your C12 to go up an octave. Because remember, it's like when we talked about the semitones between do, re, mi, between mi and fa is a missing semitone. And then between C and the do of the next octave is missing semitone. So if you have your sexual energy, it's interesting. The sexual energy plays a role here. If the sexual energy is C12, so therefore if it's C, there's something beyond that. And there's some missing semitone. What could it be? So there's more than one ways to skin a cat. There's two different ways. In Gurdjieff's system, the way he taught to exterior students was through using impressions, because impressions are hydrogen 48, you self-remember and you transform impressions. And through and this can happen through meditation, through transforming impressions, the do 48 will go do, re, mi, will turn to re 24, and then mi 12. You have two hydrogens that are 12 hydrogens. And basically you can then smash them together within your body. And that forces the sexual energy to go up an octave. And so the sexual energy, the energy of life, if you spill it outside, it creates a body for new life, another being body for another essence. But if you transmute it inwards and upwards, or as Gurdjieff would say, you do this transformation with like music theory and transforming impressions, the two hydrogens smack together, your sexual energy goes inwards and upwards, and it crystallizes into a higher astral, an existential being body, into an astral body. That's how a single person would do it. But there's also, and this is one thing, some Gurdjieffians are like, no, he never taught sex magic. But if you think about it, the law of seven, things go out and then they stop when they hit a missing semitone. What is, this is the metaphor I use. What does an orange tree create?
Oranges.
No.
Oh.
An orange tree makes flowers.
Oh.
For an orange to be created, that orange tree needs something to fill in the missing semitone. So something outside of itself. Nature sends bees to fill in the missing semitone, and then the orange can be created. So with humans, we get to the sexual energy, and then nature's like, spill it outside, make more being bodies. But if you keep it inside, you're just holding your jizz like one of those nofap dudes. What actually makes it go to the next higher octave? If just like the bee going to the flower, there is this concept of dual cultivation through two people doing the work can potentially, if both of them have they can use the hydrogen C12 of the other person to then, in a certain practice to crystallize a higher being body, an astral body. So there is something to say for Gurdjieff being a tantrika, using tantra or promoting tantra in certain practices behind closed doors to crystallize higher being bodies, but how he usually taught, and most Gurdjieffians now would be like, no, this is the only way. It would be like the just yourself. Never goon, hold your hydrogen C12, but also transforming impressions and doing certain exercises will create a surplus of energy within your body, which will eventually crystallize. And when you think of the term never goon, and when you think of the term crystallization, think of the two forms of crystallization. Like when you have salt or sugar crystals in water, you can fill up water and just have it cold and just saturate it. And then, you get a stick with some string and you put the string and you just leave it for a week and come up and there'll be crystals on it. Or you can use fire and you can boil the water as you're putting crystals in. And as you're putting, salt powder in, and it will super saturate. And then when you cool it down after the super saturation, crystals will just naturally form. So there's a wet path and a dry path, a water and a fire path. There's the slow way by yourself if you want to do it, or if you've got like your gang together and you you can potentially do the dry fiery path, tantra path, and crystallize it faster.
I just want to say for tantrikas, not that I speak for all of them, but most people don't do karma mudra, which is what Richard's calling, like quote unquote sex tantra. Most people don't do that, but there is an element of maybe restraint and withdrawal, and then also like timing nighttime activities, for the Nietzsche cycle. So the 14 or 15 lunar days of the tantric astrology. So there are concepts that you are not maybe participating in nighttime activities all the time, but even if that's true, you're not bringing that to sadhana. So I wanted to clarify that I don't do karma mudra, so nobody write me and ask me about it.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I would add that the dry path is always said to be more dangerous. That's one reason why you see the wet path taught more often. Because the wet path, what's wrong when you add water to water? What's the worst that could happen? But if you have fire and it explodes in your face, it's a little, it's tough. So dry path, people will always, there are guys who'll be like, oh, dry path, it's the best. But are they really doing it? Are they really doing it?
That's great.
I wonder if you might mention about the relationship they had prior to their meeting, and after or when they met Crowley and Gurdjieff, what was their reaction to each other?
Yeah, so now there's a book someone wrote, and I have not read it, but it's called Beelzebub and the Beast. And it's written by a guy who, it's actually a comparative book about the systems of Crowley and Gurdjieff. But he mentions the meeting in there. But the meeting of Crowley and Gurdjieff has been mythologized. So I've heard there's multiple sources, and they all say a bunch of different things. But usually it goes in one of two. Always the same thing happens where Crowley seems to like Gurdjieff, and Gurdjieff doesn't like Crowley. And it always, in most of the stories, it seems to end with Gurdjieff saying that man is filthy. But it's extreme. There's two extremes. There's either they meet, and I've heard one where apparently as soon as he walks in the door, Gurdjieff starts yelling at him and gets him out, like, leave this place and blah blah, you're filthy. But then I've heard other ones where it's like they met and they're actually really nice to each other, and they actually just kind of got along, just speaking, just talking. And they physically met as well, which is interesting. And then it's only when Crowley left that Gurdjieff turned to his associates and said, that man is filthy. But so fundamentally, the one string that's going through all of these weird stories is basically Gurdjieff and Crowley met, kind of eyed each other, sized each other up, and Gurdjieff didn't think much of Crowley, fundamentally. That's basically the story.
That's great. That's some funny shit. And he still thought he was fucked up regardless, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. Does anybody else have any other questions? All right. I guess we could wrap it up. It's almost 2 hours, man. That was great, dude. That was a lot of shit. To tell you the truth.
Hope I didn't get too autistic and abstract talking about hydrogens.
No.
No,
That
you
was
did
way
great,
more-
man.
Yeah, that was way more than
Learned a ton.
than I've heard before with the other guest. No, not it's just he seems very stuck on the food for the moon concept and shit like that.
Yeah, people need to let that go. There are some things where it's like, dog, calm down. Food for the moon is one.
Yeah, it's interesting. But all right, I'll have everybody promote their shows, and then we'll let Richard let everybody know where they can find his stuff. But Kaiva, please let everybody know where they can find all your stuff and whatever you want to promote.
Yeah. This was a lovely chat. Thanks, Richard. I didn't know much about Gurdjieff at all, actually. So this was fun and enlightening. And you can find me at Kaiva Rose on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I also have a young adult novel series called Ruach Odyssey. It's magical realism, so it's fun and gets into the magic and all that kind of stuff as well. So thanks again. I appreciate being on the show, Nick. Thank you.
Of course. No, thank you for making it. I appreciate it. And my man Jin the Ninja. What is up, Frada?
Thank you so much, Cardinal. And also thank you to Richard, because at least you can't really call yourself autistic when I'm on the stream, as you know, Richard, because, you know, I love Kabbalah and I'm a Kabbalah autist. So there you go. And I'm glad I got to flex a little in front of Jules. You know, it's been a quick minute. So anyways, thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. Thank you to everybody. And you can check out my show at thresholdsaints.substack.com or at youtube.com/The True Grey Lodge. All the Threshold Saints episodes will be there. There will also be a new series with Solar Exile, who's my sometimes but often co-host on Threshold Saints. He's doing an office hours. So I'm on 2 episodes. Eros will be on 2 episodes. So everybody can check that out. It should be really good. It's on the Aeonic Politics and Aeon of the Daughter, really. So go check that out. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
No, thank you, Jin. I appreciate you and your questions and the stuff you had to add. Appreciate it, man. I was glad you made it. And then we got Robbie Marks. What is going on, sir? How are you? Story time.
Yeah, doing good. I just got back from Florida, so I'm a little worn out. But yeah, I wanted to say thanks to Richard. That was it's been years since I've read anything in regard to Gurdjieff, and that was a nice full refresher. But yeah, as far as myself, I'm R Marks, artist illustrator. You can find all my stuff on my Linktree, which is Linktree R Marks. And yeah, this was fun just to hang out and kind of get a good little refresher. Thanks for having me on, Nick.
No, thank you. Yeah, I didn't know much about the guy either, so this was really awesome for me. Thank you. Ethan Indigo, what is going on, buddy?
Well, thanks everyone. That was awesome. Richard, thank you so much for dropping all the great information. Really appreciate that. Ethan Indigo Smith on all the usual suspects of the social media, and just trying to bring wisdom maxing into the public consciousness, dude, as everyone is. So again, thank you, Richard. That was awesome.
I like that, right?
I like that, Ethan.
I was like, oh,
wisdom max. Gnosis maxing.
Yeah, there you go. Better.
Yeah.
I like that. Thank you so much for coming on, Ethan. And my man Jules, what is going on, bro? Thank you so much for making
Thank you for inviting me. This was a banger. Like all of you, I did not know much about Gurdjieff, only what we had read on that one esoteric book review, which is tomorrow morning, guys. Don't miss out.
I'll be there.
Reading the Prose Edda and some treatise by Manly P. Hall. I think it may be on Gnosticism. So Rat's going to be pretty bricked up the entire show. Anyway, yeah, no, this was a great episode. Richard, I got to get you on for an interview.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, man, we'll schedule that in the back channels. But yeah, no, you definitely taught me something tonight. I think anyone who watched this tonight, you probably taught them something. So thank you. And yeah, guys, go over to Patreon. Gods of the Morning Wood, 9 a.m. tomorrow. And go follow me on X at greypilledpod. It was good seeing everybody. Hopefully I can start making more of these. And yeah, thanks again, Nick.
No, I'm glad you made it, Jules. It was good to have you on again, man. Especially on a Friday night. It's always a blast.
Yeah. After working 10 hours, I'm not worth much, but you know.
No, come on, yeah. I was glad you made it, man. And Richard, please, Richard Ruach, let everybody know where they can find you, sir.
Thank you for having me on, and thank you for coming,
it's
everybody.
A pleasure, please.
I'm always down to talk a little Gurdjieff. And yeah, if you want to find me, you can find me on my YouTube channel, Richard Ruach. I read through the entirety of Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson on live stream, which you can check out that playlist on my channel. That was a journey. And it's I also have a bunch of kind of explaining Gurdjieff videos, some of the concepts in a playlist called Wiseacring, which is a funny fourth way joke if you're into the fourth way. But nonetheless, find me on YouTube, find me on Twitter, find me on Substack, and find me in the astral plane. Thank you for having me.
No, of course, thank you. Hopefully I have you on again in the future at some point. But yeah, thank you everybody on the show. It was a blast. I really had a good time. And thank you everybody in the chat. There's a lot of good questions, a lot of good comments. I appreciate it. That's why we go live. And that's the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one.